I am Anna. I am 34 years old. Just 2 months ago, my own flesh and blood stood in a freezing, fluorescent-lit Boston courtroom and tried to destroy me. They were holding my younger sister's hand, my sister, who was heavily pregnant with my husband's child, and they looked the judge dead in the eye, demanding that I empty my bank accounts to support them. In the middle of my entire world collapsing, my mother actually pointed her manicured finger right at my face and said I was a bitter, vindictive woman who owed her pregnant sister a comfortable life. They laughed at me in the courthouse hallway. They genuinely believed they had me trapped in a corner. But there was one massive, landscape-altering detail they did not know. They had absolutely no idea about the ironclad legal documents my lawyer was holding, the secret inheritance structure I had built years ago, and the fact that their arrogance was about to cost them absolutely everything. And now? Now they are the ones leaving desperate voicemails, begging me for a dime to save their home. Before I tell you exactly how I legally and financially dismantled their perfect little plan, please hit that like button if you believe that true justice always comes for those who wait. And please, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Now, let's go back to the very beginning, to the root of this entire nightmare. If you grew up in a household where you were the invisible child, you already know the heavy, suffocating weight I am about to describe. It is a specific kind of loneliness. I grew up in suburban Boston with my parents, Robert and Sarah, and my younger sister, Jessica. Jessica is 8 years younger than me. From the literal moment they brought her home from the hospital wrapped in a pink blanket, my existence in that house became nothing more than a footnote. I was the textbook definition of a family scapegoat, while Jessica was the ultimate, untouchable golden child. It was not just that they favored her, it was the active, daily, systematic dismissal of my entire life. I remember being in the 6th grade. I had spent 3 entire months working on a functional model of solar system dynamics for the regional science fair. I did not just paint styrofoam balls. I spent weeks at the public library, reading college-level astronomy books. I calculated orbital dynamics, I wired a tiny motor to make the planets revolve at scale, and I wrote a meticulous 10-page report. I was so proud of that project that my hands would shake when I worked on it. I won first prize and a special commendation for mathematical precision from the county judges. I remember running the 6 blocks home, my lungs burning in the crisp autumn air, clutching that giant blue ribbon. I was certain that finally, my parents would look at me with the same glowing pride they reserved for Jessica. But when I burst through the front door, the house was dead silent. They were not there. They had gone to watch Jessica's toddler dance practice. I need you to understand this, it was not a recital. It was not a performance. It was a routine Tuesday afternoon practice for a 3-year-old. My beautiful blue ribbon sat on the kitchen counter for 3 entire days before my mother absent-mindedly tossed it into a junk drawer to make room for Jessica's finger paintings on the refrigerator. That single afternoon became the absolute blueprint of my childhood. If I brought home a report card with straight A's, my mother would quickly pull me into the hallway, lower her voice to a harsh whisper, and tell me to stop bragging about my grades because it might make Jessica feel bad about her C- average. While I was bagging groceries at a local supermarket at 16, standing on my feet for 8 hours a day just to scrape together a meager college fund, Jessica turned 16 and woke up to a brand new, silver Porsche parked in our driveway. A Porsche. For a teenager who could not even pass her learner's permit test on the first try because she refused to read the manual. I remember standing in the driveway in my cheap polyester grocery store uniform, looking at that car. My dad just laughed, patted Jessica's shoulder, and told me that she needed a safe, reliable luxury car to build her self-esteem. The absolute breaking point, the moment my childhood innocence truly died, happened at my high school graduation. I graduated as the valedictorian of my class. I stood on that massive auditorium stage looking out at the sea of families. I gave my speech, pouring my heart out about overcoming obstacles and the power of hard work. When I looked for my parents in the crowd, trying to find a single familiar face to anchor me, they were not even watching the stage. They had their backs completely turned to me, arguing over the camera settings while trying to take candid photos of Jessica playing with a balloon in the bleachers. A few weeks later, the letter arrived. The thick envelope from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I had been accepted on a partial scholarship. I was shaking so hard I could barely open it. It was my golden ticket out of that toxic, suffocating house. I brought the letter to the dinner table that night, placing it gently next to my mother's wine glass. She picked it up, barely glanced at the prestigious letterhead, took a slow sip of her Chardonnay, and said, "That is nice, honey. But did you hear Jessica might get the lead in the middle school play next season? We really need to focus our budget on getting her a private vocal coach." I did not cry. I think I stopped crying over their approval when I was about 12 years old. Instead, sitting at that dinner table, a very cold, very quiet determination settled deep into my bones. I realized right then and there that my obedience, my stellar achievements, my desperate, pathetic attempts to be a good daughter would never, ever be enough for them. I packed my bags for MIT, used every single dollar I had saved from 3 grueling part-time jobs, and I walked out of that house. They did not even help me pack my boxes or drive me to my dorm. They had a weekend trip planned for Jessica's cheerleading camp. I learned very early in life that the only person coming to save Anna was Anna herself. Stepping onto the MIT campus changed the entire trajectory of my life. For the very first time, I was surrounded by brilliant, driven people who valued me exclusively for my brain and my relentless work ethic. I threw myself into computer science with an obsession that bordered on unhealthy. I barely slept during those 4 years. I lived on cheap dining hall coffee and instant noodles, sitting in the fluorescent glow of the library basement until 2 in the morning, but I was building an empire inside my mind. I graduated with high honors and immediately landed a highly coveted job as a junior software developer at a massive, globally recognized tech firm right in the heart of Boston. I put my head down and worked harder than anyone else in my department. By the time I was 29 years old, I had received my 3rd major promotion, accompanied by a base salary that my parents could not even begin to fathom. I became the youngest senior software architect in the company's entire history. It was during this specific time, when I was feeling absolutely invincible professionally but incredibly hollow and lonely personally, that I met Aaron. We met at a small, independent coffee shop just 2 blocks from my office building. He was a financial analyst for a mid-sized firm. He was tall, exceptionally handsome, charming, and he had this intense, focused way of looking at you like you were the absolute center of the universe. Because I had grown up completely starved for genuine affection and validation, I was an incredibly easy target for a man like him. We went on our first date to a quiet Italian restaurant, and we ended up talking for 6 consecutive hours. I opened up to him in a way I had never opened up to anyone. I told him about the science fair. I told him about the silver Porsche. I told him about the suffocating, heavy shadow of being the invisible sister to the golden child. Aaron reached across the white tablecloth, held both of my hands firmly in his, looked deep into my eyes, and said the exact words my wounded inner child had been waiting her entire life to hear. He said, "Anna, they are blind. They have absolutely no idea what they missed out on by ignoring you. You are brilliant and beautiful. But I see you. I see exactly who you are, and I am never going to look away." I fell for him. I fell so incredibly hard. We got married 2 years later. It was a beautiful, elegant, but small ceremony, mostly attended by my close friends and my incredibly supportive colleagues. My parents showed up 45 minutes late, complained loudly about the catered food, and spent the entire wedding reception talking to my husband's extended family about how amazing Jessica was doing at her glamorous new marketing job out in California. But for the first time in my life, their behavior did not crush me. I did not care. I had Aaron. Shortly after the wedding, we bought a stunning, high-end condo in Cambridge. It was prime real estate with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Charles River. I paid the entire down payment myself, utilizing my substantial savings and a small, private inheritance from my late grandmother, the only person in my bloodline who ever actually cherished me. I remember standing in our new living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes, the smell of fresh paint in the air. Aaron came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist, kissed the top of my head, and whispered that it was us against the world. But the world has a very cruel, very funny way of testing those whispered promises. About 3 years into our seemingly perfect marriage, Jessica's glamorous, fast-paced life in California completely and utterly imploded. She got fired from her agency for gross incompetence, burned through the massive trust fund my parents had secretly set up for her, and suddenly, she was on a flight back to Boston, playing the ultimate victim. She sent me a long, tear-stained, incredibly manipulative email talking about how much she missed her big sister and how family absolutely must stick together during the tough times. I wanted to ignore it. Every single survival instinct in my body screamed at me to hit the delete button, block her number, and protect my peace. But Aaron stepped in. He immediately played the role of the compassionate, reasonable peacemaker. "She is your sister, Anna," he would say, gently rubbing my shoulders while I stared at the computer screen. People evolve. Maybe failing in California finally humbled her. You have this beautiful, successful life now. Maybe it is time to be the bigger person and extend an olive branch. Do not let your childhood trauma dictate our family's future. God, looking back, the manipulation was so subtle, so perfectly executed. Against my better judgment, I agreed to a casual dinner. Jessica came over, playing the sweet, reformed, slightly broken little sister to absolute perfection. She complimented my home design, asked Aaron insightful questions about his finance job, and even offered a half-hearted apology for being self-centered in the past. Within a month, she went from a dinner guest to a regular, permanent fixture in our condo. She started dropping by unannounced all the time. I would come home exhausted from a grueling 10-hour day managing my development team, my brain fried from staring at code, and I would find Jessica and Aaron sitting close together on my expensive leather couch, drinking my expensive wine, laughing uproariously at some inside joke I was not a part of. I started noticing the little things. The tiny, insidious red flags. The way she would casually touch his forearm when she laughed at a joke that was not even funny. The way they would suddenly stop talking and shift away from each other the second I walked into the kitchen. The absolute worst was the Tuesday afternoon I came home early because of a migraine. Aaron was supposed to be working from home in his office, and she was supposed to be out handing in resumes. Instead, I found my favorite, custom-made coffee mug sitting in the kitchen sink with a distinct smudge of her signature red lipstick on the rim. Whenever I brought up my discomfort, Aaron would flawlessly gaslight me. He would sigh heavily, give me this incredibly patronizing, pitying look, and say, "Anna, you are doing it again. You are projecting your deep-seated insecurities onto us. She looks up to me as an older brother figure because your dad is so emotionally absent. You are being completely paranoid and honestly, a little toxic right now. You really need to work on your jealousy issues before you push your own family away." I started feeling like I was genuinely losing my mind. I was a brilliant software engineer who could optimize complex distributed systems and manage multi-million-dollar projects, but standing in my own kitchen, I felt like a crazy, neurotic, insecure wife. I tried so hard to push down the anxiety. I tried to be the cool, supportive older sister and the unconditionally trusting wife. I baked them dinners, I let her stay over in our beautiful guest room when she claimed she had a massive fight with our parents. I opened the doors of my safe sanctuary to the very person who had stolen every ounce of joy from my childhood. I did not know it yet, but I was letting a starving wolf straight into the henhouse, and she was already baring her teeth. The massive, life-altering explosion happened on a dark, rainy Thursday night. The weather outside matched the heavy, suffocating atmosphere inside my home perfectly. We were having dinner at our large mahogany dining table, just me, Aaron, and Jessica. She had practically moved her entire life into our guest room at this point, leaving her designer clothes draped over my furniture. I was serving a complex roast chicken recipe I had spent 2 hours making after a brutal day at the office. The air in the room was thick, almost electric with unspoken tension. Jessica took 2 bites of her food, pushed her plate away with a loud scrape, looked directly at Aaron, and then slowly turned her gaze to me. "I have some news," she said. Her voice was not nervous. It was dripping with this strange, theatrical, almost victorious honey. "I am pregnant." I completely froze. My silver fork clattered loudly onto my porcelain plate. A million chaotic thoughts raced through my head at light speed. Who was the father? When did she even start dating someone? Why was she telling us like this? But before I could articulate a single, logical question, I looked over at my husband. Aaron was not surprised. He was not shocked. He did not ask who the father was. Instead, a slow, sickeningly smug, deeply satisfied smile spread across his face. He looked at Jessica with a level of raw intimacy and shared knowledge that made the blood instantly freeze in my veins. They shared a look right in front of me, a secret, triumphant, utterly disgusting look of pure complicity. My stomach plummeted so fast I felt physically nauseous. The silence in the room was deafening. I did not say a word. I mechanically picked up my fork, chewed my food tasting absolutely nothing, excused myself in a monotone voice, and walked straight into the master bathroom. I locked the heavy wooden door, sank down onto the cold marble tile floor, pulled my knees to my chest, and tried to remember how to breathe. My highly analytical mind began connecting the scattered dots with brutal, terrifying efficiency. The afternoon wine sessions. The lipstick on the mug. The sudden silence when I entered a room. The way he aggressively defended her against my completely valid concerns. I stayed in that bathroom for an hour. When I finally came out, I told them I was feeling sick and went to bed. I waited. I lay perfectly still in the dark, listening to the rain hit the window and listening to Aaron's steady, rhythmic breathing next to me. At exactly 2 a.m., when I was absolutely certain he was in a deep REM cycle, I silently slipped out from under the covers. I picked up his phone from the nightstand, my hands cold as ice, and carried it out into the living room. I knew his passcode. It was the date of our wedding anniversary. How incredibly, darkly poetic. I sat on the couch and opened his messages. I did not even have to dig or search. Her name was pinned to the very top of his text application. The contact name was simply Jessie with a red heart emoji. What I read over the next 2 agonizing hours systematically and ruthlessly destroyed the last 6 years of my life. They had been sleeping together for 6 entire months. The affair started exactly 2 weeks after she moved back from California and I invited her over for that first reconciliation dinner. There were digital receipts for boutique hotels downtown. There were hundreds of messages about how I was too focused on my career, how I was cold and calculated, while Jessica was warm, vibrant, and alive. But the betrayal went so much deeper than just a physical affair. It was a highly calculated, malicious financial and emotional assassination plot. I scrolled up and found a text thread from exactly 3 weeks prior. "Jessica, what are we going to do about the condo? I want the nursery to be in the guest room, it gets the best morning light. Aaron, just be patient, babe. Once you're showing, we will tell her everything. She is so obsessed with keeping the peace and avoiding conflict, she will probably just pack up and walk away to avoid the drama. The condo is a marital asset anyway, my lawyer buddy at the firm said I can easily force a buyout or just get her to leave since she makes more money. We will have our beautiful family right here." I did not cry. The tears simply refused to surface. The little girl who cried over the ignored science fair project was dead and buried. In her place sat a grown woman who suddenly saw the world, her marriage, and her family in absolute, terrifying, crystal-clear focus. When the sun finally came up, casting a gray, dismal light across the living room, I was still sitting in the armchair, fully dressed in my work clothes, Aaron's unlocked phone resting squarely on the center of the glass coffee table. He walked out of the master bedroom around 7 a.m., rubbing the sleep from his eyes, wearing the expensive silk pajamas I had bought him for his birthday. He saw me sitting there like a statue. He saw his phone. And he stopped dead in his tracks, the color completely draining from his face. I know absolutely everything, I said. My voice did not even tremble. It was flat and hollow. Pack your bags. Get out of my house. Hearing the commotion, Jessica walked out of the guest room, clutching her expensive silk robe. When she looked at the table and realized exactly what was happening, she immediately, flawlessly turned on the waterworks. Anna, please, she sobbed, dropping to her knees. We did not mean for this to happen. We connected. He understands my pain. We were going to sit you down and tell you the right way, but I got pregnant, and we did not want to hurt you. Hurt me? I stood up, towering over her. You planned to kick me out of my own home so you could turn my guest room into a nursery for the baby you purposefully made with my husband. Both of you, get out. Now. Aaron immediately shifted from shock to aggressive defense. It is half my condo, Anna. You cannot just illegally throw me out onto the street. We need to sit down and figure this out like adults. Get out, I said, picking up my phone and dialing 3 numbers, holding my thumb over the call button. Or I call the police right now and tell them there is an unwanted intruder refusing to leave my property. They scrambled. They grabbed whatever clothes they could fit into overnight bags and practically ran out the door. The silence in the condo after the door clicked shut was absolute. But the worst, the most soul-crushing part of the day was yet to come. Later that morning, operating purely on shock and adrenaline, I called my parents. A tiny, pathetic, lingering part of my inner child hoped that surely, this would be the definitive line. Surely, sleeping with your older sister's husband in her own home and getting pregnant on purpose was the line that even the golden child could not cross without facing severe consequences from our parents. My mother answered the phone. I calmly, factually told her exactly what I had discovered. There was a long, heavy silence on the phone. And then, my own mother took a deep breath and said the exact words that finally, permanently, and irreversibly severed the blood cord between us. Well, Anna, she sighed, her voice dripping with annoyance rather than sympathy. Jessica made a severe mistake, yes. But she is pregnant. She is carrying my grandchild. Aaron is going to be a father now, and that changes things. You have a great career, you are emotionally strong, you can bounce back from this easily. You need to forgive her and act like the bigger person here. Consider the infant. Honestly, Anna, if you had paid more attention to Aaron's emotional needs instead of working 80 hours a week, maybe he would not have strayed in the first place. She blamed me. She protected the cheating golden child, she excused my cheating husband, and she threw me directly to the wolves without a second thought. I did not scream. I simply hung up the phone. I did not say goodbye. I walked into my home office, opened my laptop, and I started searching for the most ruthless, aggressive, terrifyingly competent divorce lawyer in the entire state of Massachusetts. The storm had not just started, I was about to become the hurricane. I did not just find a standard divorce lawyer. I found Eleanor. Eleanor was a 60-year-old legal shark who wore razor-sharp designer suits, drank her coffee black, and looked at the world with a deeply cynical, hyper-calculated gaze. When I sat in her pristine, high-rise office overlooking the Boston skyline and laid out the facts, the affair, the pregnancy, and the printed screenshots of the text messages proving their premeditated intent to seize my assets, she did not offer me a tissue or a sympathetic pat on the back. She offered me a declaration of war. They think they have all the leverage because of the baby, Eleanor said, methodically tapping her expensive Mont Blanc pen against her massive mahogany desk. They think you will just roll over and surrender your assets to avoid a messy, embarrassing public scandal. Let me ask you a very important question, Anna. How far are you willing to go? Burn it all to the ground, I said, my voice as steady as stone. I want to leave him with absolutely nothing he did not earn himself. Which, mathematically speaking, is nothing. This is where the massive secret comes in. The one thing Aaron, Jessica, and my deeply greedy parents did not know. Before Aaron and I got married, right after my grandmother's funeral, I received a very substantial inheritance. My grandmother was a smart woman. She knew my parents would try to siphon off that money to fund Jessica's lifestyle, so she left it entirely to me, wrapped in a strict legal structure. But being a meticulous software architect, I always look for vulnerabilities in the system. So, I went a step further. Before I even said I do to Aaron, I had quietly, legally moved that entire inheritance, along with a massive chunk of my own tech salary bonuses and vested stock options, into an irrevocable trust. An irrevocable trust is exactly what it sounds like. It cannot be altered, amended, or touched by a spouse in the event of a divorce. Legally speaking, Anna the individual did not own those assets, the trust owned them. And that beautiful, $1 million condo in Cambridge? The massive down payment came directly from the trust, and the title of the property was held by an LLC completely controlled by the trust. Aaron thought he owned half of a prime piece of real estate. In reality, he owned half of the living room furniture and a few kitchen appliances. We do not tell them, Eleanor smiled, a wicked, brilliant, terrifying smile. We let them spend their meager savings hiring a lawyer to fight for assets that do not even legally exist on your marital balance sheet. We let them dig their own financial grave, and then we hand them the bill. I went back to work. I brutally compartmentalized my pain and poured every single ounce of my raging energy into a massive software launch my team was handling. I was earning more money than ever, securing a massive annual bonus, and I channeled my anger into pure, unadulterated professional productivity. But my family, true to their toxic nature, was not going to let me heal in peace. About a month after I kicked Aaron out, the harassment campaign began to escalate rapidly. They quickly realized that Aaron's completely average salary as a mid-level analyst could not possibly support his expensive lifestyle, a pregnant mistress with a shopping addiction, and a retainer for a divorce attorney. I was in the middle of a crucial, high-stakes code review meeting with upper management when my phone aggressively buzzed on the table. It was an emergency text from the front desk of my office building. Anna, your mother is down in the main lobby. She is screaming and refusing to leave. I took a slow, deep breath, excused myself politely from the meeting, and took the elevator down to the glass-walled lobby. There she was. My mother, Sarah, wearing her Sunday best, pacing the marble floor like a caged animal. When she saw me step out of the elevator, she did not greet me. She launched into a loud, theatrical tirade right in front of the security desk, the receptionists, and several of my colleagues who were grabbing coffee. There you are. You will not answer any of our calls, so I had to come down here to your fancy office, she shouted, her voice echoing shrilly off the high ceilings. Your sister is having a high-risk pregnancy. Aaron's cheap company insurance barely covers any of the specialists. Your father and I are actively depleting our 401k retirement funds just to pay for her prenatal care. It is time for you to step up, take charge, and support your family during this difficult time. You make hundreds of thousands a year, Anna. Stop being so incredibly selfish and vindictive over a little mistake. Dozens of people were staring. Chloe, a close colleague from my marketing team, stood nearby, her jaw practically on the floor, holding her coffee cup in shock. I walked right up to my mother. I did not whisper. I did not cower. I matched her volume, but I kept my tone completely flat, cold, and devastatingly professional. A little mistake? I said, projecting my voice so everyone could hear the context of her harassment. He slept with my sister in my house for 6 months and tried to steal my home. That is a deliberate, calculated series of malicious choices. Not a mistake. And now you are standing in my place of business, demanding that I finance the medical care for the child my husband conceived with my sister? You are being incredibly selfish, she shrieked, her face turning a blotchy red as she realized the crowd was judging her, not me. We provided for you. You provided absolutely nothing, I replied, my voice slicing through the air like a knife. I paid for my own college fund. I bought my own clothes. You bought my sister a brand new Porsche. Go ask the local Porsche dealership to pay her medical bills. At that exact moment, my boss, David, a no-nonsense, highly protective executive from Chicago, stepped out of the elevator. He had heard the commotion. He looked at my mother, assessed the situation in 2 seconds, and then looked at Marcus, our massive, ex-military security guard. "Marcus," David said calmly, adjusting his suit jacket. "Please escort this woman off the private premises immediately. If she returns or attempts to contact Anna at this office again, call the police and file formal trespassing and harassment charges." My mother's face went completely white. She sputtered, trying desperately to maintain some shred of dignity as Marcus gently but firmly guided her by the elbow toward the revolving glass doors. "You will regret this, Anna. You are abandoning your own blood when we need you the most," she yelled from the sidewalk outside. I turned around, thanked David and Marcus sincerely, and walked right back into my meeting. I felt a strange, intoxicating sense of liberation. The worst they could do was try to publicly humiliate me, but the only person who looked pathetic, desperate, and unhinged was her. Later that evening, sitting alone in my quiet condo, I checked my email spam folder. Aaron had created a brand new email address just to bypass the strict blocks I had put on his phone and accounts. The subject line simply read, "Please read. Urgent." Inside was a scanned picture of a sonogram. The text below it read, "Anna, please. We are really struggling over here. Jess is so incredibly stressed about money and her health, and the doctor said it is bad for the baby. Your niece or nephew needs you right now. I know you are hurt and angry at me, but please do not take it out on an innocent child. We just need some help with the specialized medical bills and the lawyer retainer. Be the bigger person." They were literally using an unborn child as a psychological weapon to extort money from the very woman they had just destroyed. I did not reply. I did not shed a single tear. I calmly downloaded the email, printed the sonogram and the message, and put it directly into Eleanor's rapidly growing legal file. They thought they were brilliantly playing on my emotions to get into my wallet. They were actually just providing me with undeniable, documented proof of financial harassment and emotional manipulation. The storm was swirling violently all around me, ripping apart the foundations of the family I thought I knew. But inside my mind, I was perfectly, terrifyingly still. I was the eye of the hurricane. I went to sleep that night knowing that when the trial date finally arrived, the devastation I was about to unleash upon them would be absolute and final. I thought I had seen the absolute worst of their greed and delusion. But as the custody and divorce lawsuit approached, I realized I was so incredibly wrong. They were about to walk right into a trap they built themselves. The 2 months leading up to the preliminary divorce and custody hearing were an absolute masterclass in psychological warfare and financial harassment. If you have ever been through a high-conflict divorce, you know exactly what the waiting period feels like. It is a slow, agonizing drip of anxiety. But I had Eleanor, and Eleanor did not play defense, she orchestrated controlled demolitions. During those 8 weeks, Aaron's lawyer, a sleazy, loud-talking man named Mr. Vance, bombarded Eleanor's office with a mountain of ridiculous legal demands. They sent formal letters demanding that I continue to pay the mortgage on the Cambridge condo, even though Aaron was currently living in a rented apartment with Jessica. They demanded an exorbitant amount of temporary spousal support, claiming that Aaron had suffered severe emotional distress due to my hostile and cold demeanor, which allegedly caused his performance at his finance job to plummet. But the absolute most infuriating demand was the medical addendum. They formally petitioned the court to force me to pay for Jessica's out-of-pocket medical expenses, explicitly stating that my vindictive eviction of them had caused Jessica such profound psychological trauma that her pregnancy was now classified as extremely high risk, requiring weekly specialized care that Aaron's standard insurance simply would not cover. They were so incredibly arrogant. They thought that because I had always been the quiet, obedient, compliant scapegoat of the family, I would eventually cave under the immense pressure of a public lawsuit. They genuinely believed I would write a massive check just to make the overwhelming embarrassment go away. They had absolutely no idea that I was spending my evenings sitting in Eleanor's high-rise office, drinking black coffee, and meticulously preparing a legal trap so airtight that it would suffocate their entire future. The morning of the court date finally arrived in late November. The sky over Boston was a heavy, unforgiving gray, spitting cold rain against the pavement. I wore a tailored, dark navy suit. I did not wear much makeup. I did not want to look like a victim, I wanted to look like an executive who was about to audit a failing company. I walked into the heavy, imposing double doors of the courthouse with Eleanor by my side. The smell of old wood, floor wax, and nervous sweat hung in the air. As we walked down the long, echoing marble corridor toward our assigned courtroom, I saw them. My entire biological family, gathered together like a picture-perfect holiday greeting card from hell. Aaron was wearing his best charcoal suit, the one I had bought him for our 3rd anniversary. My father, Robert, stood tall and protective, his hand resting firmly on Aaron's shoulder as if Aaron were his own biological son. My mother, Sarah, was fussing over Jessica. And then there was Jessica. She was only about 4 months pregnant, barely showing at all, but she was wearing a tight, strategically draped maternity dress designed to emphasize her stomach. She had one hand resting protectively over her lower belly, leaning heavily against Aaron, playing the fragile, terrified mother-to-be to absolute perfection. When they saw me approaching, the dynamic shifted instantly. My mother glared at me with a look of pure, unadulterated venom. Jessica shrank back behind Aaron, casting her eyes down as if my mere presence was a physical threat to her. Aaron just smirked. It was a small, arrogant, deeply entitled smirk. He thought he had the upper hand because he had my parents on his side. He thought public opinion and family pressure were legal currency. We entered the courtroom. The judge assigned to our case was Judge Margaret, a no-nonsense, incredibly sharp woman with steel-gray hair and a reputation for absolutely despising people who wasted the court's valuable time. She took her seat at the high bench, adjusted her reading glasses, and looked down at the massive stack of files in front of her. "All right," Judge Margaret said, her voice cutting through the silent room like a whip. "Let us get this preliminary hearing underway. I have reviewed the initial filings. Mr. Vance, you represent the petitioner, Aaron. You are asking for a significant division of marital assets, immediate temporary spousal support, and an emergency order for the respondent, Anna, to cover third-party medical expenses. The floor is yours. Explain this to me." Mr. Vance stood up, buttoned his cheap suit jacket, and puffed out his chest. He launched into a deeply passionate, highly fabricated narrative that belonged in a daytime soap opera. "Your Honor," Vance began, using his best theatrical voice. "My client, Aaron, is the victim of a deeply controlling, emotionally absent spouse. Throughout their marriage, Anna prioritized her incredibly lucrative tech career over her marital duties. When my client found comfort and emotional support elsewhere, Anna reacted with a level of extreme vindictiveness that borders on cruelty. She illegally forced my client out of his primary residence, a luxury condo that is undeniably a marital asset. Furthermore, her ongoing campaign of workplace harassment and emotional abuse has completely destroyed my client's professional reputation, severely limiting his current earning capacity." Vance dramatically paused, gesturing toward Jessica, who was sitting in the gallery, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. "But the most urgent matter, Your Honor, is the unborn child," Vance continued, lowering his voice to a solemn whisper. "Anna's relentless hostility and aggressive eviction caused the mother of my client's child, Jessica, to experience severe panic attacks. Her doctor has officially classified this as a high-risk pregnancy. We are simply asking for fairness. Anna has a massive salary. She has vast financial resources. My client is simply asking for his legal half of the real estate, and a temporary support structure so he can provide a safe environment for his fragile new family." I sat perfectly still. I did not roll my eyes. I did not clench my fists. I just watched them. My parents were nodding vigorously in the gallery behind Aaron, completely validating every single lie. Judge Margaret turned her piercing gaze to my side of the table. "Counselor," she addressed Eleanor. Does your client have a response to these rather severe allegations of financial withholding and emotional distress? Eleanor stood up. She did not rush. She smoothed the front of her designer blazer, picked up a single sheet of paper, and looked directly at Aaron. "Your Honor," Eleanor said, her voice calm, clear, and dripping with lethal confidence. "Before we address the asset division, I would like to establish the factual baseline of these emotional distress and medical claims. Because if my client is going to be held financially responsible for a high-risk pregnancy, we need to ensure the court has the absolute, unvarnished truth under oath." Eleanor turned to Mr. Vance. "Counselor, is your client, Aaron, willing to state under oath, right now, on the legal record, that Anna engaged in a campaign of harassment that caused his job loss? And is he willing to state under oath that Jessica's pregnancy is medically classified as high risk due to Anna's actions?" Mr. Vance looked incredibly smug. He thought Eleanor was trying to intimidate them with a basic legal formality. He leaned down, whispered something to Aaron. Aaron nodded confidently, a triumphant gleam in his eye. "Yes, Your Honor," Aaron spoke up directly, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "I absolutely swear to it. Anna harassed my family, she ruined my standing at work, and she put Jessica's health and the baby's life in severe danger because of her uncontrollable jealousy. That is the absolute truth." In the gallery, my mother let out a loud, supportive sigh, crossing her arms and glaring at me. They had fully committed to the lie. They had locked themselves inside the burning building, completely unaware that Eleanor was holding the only key to the exit. Eleanor did not blink. She simply nodded slowly, turning back to the judge. "Thank you, Aaron, for getting that on the official court transcript. Your Honor, the defense would now like to present 3 pieces of highly relevant evidence that will completely alter the trajectory of this hearing." Eleanor reached down, unclasped the brass locks of her thick black leather briefcase, and pulled out a massive stack of perfectly organized, legally binding documents. The trap had been flawlessly set. The jaws were about to snap shut. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted imperceptibly. Judge Margaret leaned forward, peering over her glasses, her interest genuinely piqued by Eleanor's absolute, unwavering confidence. "Proceed, Counselor," Judge Margaret instructed. Eleanor handed the first heavy folder to the bailiff, who passed it up to the judge. She handed a duplicate copy to a suddenly very nervous-looking Mr. Vance. "Let us address the deeply disturbing allegations of harassment first," Eleanor began, her voice ringing out crisp and clear. Mr. Vance claimed that Anna aggressively harassed Aaron and Jessica. Exhibit A is a certified flash drive containing high-definition security footage and sworn affidavits from the head of security at Anna's corporate office building. The footage clearly shows Sarah, Anna's mother, trespassing on private corporate property, screaming obscenities in a public lobby, and demanding money. It also includes an email from Aaron, sent from a burner account, attempting to use an ultrasound picture to extort my client for cash. Anna did not harass anyone. She was the victim of a highly coordinated, relentless family extortion attempt. Judge Margaret glanced at the summary affidavit, her eyebrows rising slightly. In the gallery, my mother shifted uncomfortably in her wooden seat, the color suddenly draining from her cheeks. "Now," Eleanor continued, not missing a single beat, stepping right into the second, far more devastating twist. "Let us discuss this tragic, high-risk pregnancy that my client is supposedly responsible for funding. We legally subpoenaed Jessica's complete prenatal medical records from her primary obstetrician, Dr. Emily Carter. Please refer to Exhibit B." Aaron's smug smile instantly vanished. Jessica let out a small, sharp gasp from the gallery. They never thought we would actually verify the medical claims. They assumed the sacred shield of a pregnancy would stop any aggressive legal digging. "According to these certified medical records," Eleanor stated, holding up her copy of the document, "Jessica's pregnancy is perfectly, beautifully normal. There are 0 complications. There is 0 high-risk classification. Her blood pressure is completely optimal. Furthermore, the notes from her last 3 appointments indicate that Jessica explicitly asked her doctor to write a note excusing her from seeking employment due to stress, which Dr. Carter formally refused to do because there was absolutely no medical justification. She is not a fragile victim of high-risk trauma. She is a completely healthy woman who simply refuses to get a job. Objection. Mr. Vance shouted, his face turning bright red as he desperately shuffled through the devastating medical records. This is a gross violation of privacy. You literally made her medical condition the central foundation of your demand for financial support, counselor, Judge Margaret snapped, her voice turning cold and dangerous. Overruled. Sit down, Mr. Vance. Continue, Eleanor. Thank you, Your Honor. Which brings us to the third point, Eleanor said, pulling out a third, thick document. Mr. Vance claimed that Anna's vindictive behavior ruined Aaron's career and caused Jessica to be unemployable. Exhibit C contains the official, subpoenaed employment records for both Aaron and Jessica. Aaron was not fired because of Anna. Aaron's HR file shows he was placed on strict disciplinary probation 3 months before the affair was even discovered, due to severe incompetence and missing critical financial deadlines. And Jessica? We ran a comprehensive corporate background check. She did not return from California because the startup culture wasn't her vibe. She was terminated with extreme prejudice from her marketing agency for blatant expense account fraud. She is currently blacklisted in her industry. That is why nobody in Boston will hire her. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that occurs right after a massive explosion, before the dust begins to settle. Aaron looked like he was going to be physically sick. Jessica was staring down at her lap, her face completely hidden behind her hair. My parents were frozen in shock, their perfect, beautiful illusion of their golden child violently shattered in front of a federal judge. Your Honor, Eleanor said, her voice dropping to a serious, commanding register. Aaron just swore under oath, on the official record, that these fabricated hardships were true. My client has been subjected to a malicious, coordinated campaign of perjury, character assassination, and financial extortion. Mr. Vance was sweating profusely. He was legally cornered, and he knew his clients had lied to him. Your Honor, he stammered, frantically trying to salvage the wreckage. Regardless of the specifics of the emotional distress claims, we still have the very real matter of the marital assets. They were married for 6 years. Aaron is legally entitled to 50% of the marital estate. He is entitled to half the equity in the Cambridge luxury condo, and half of the massive savings and stock portfolios Anna accumulated during their union. We demand the immediate liquidation of the real estate to facilitate this division. This was it. This was the moment I had survived the last few months for. I sat up perfectly straight, resting my hands neatly on the wooden table, and looked directly into Aaron's panic-stricken eyes. Eleanor smiled. It was the smile of an apex predator that had just cornered its prey. Your Honor, regarding the division of assets, Eleanor said smoothly, reaching into her briefcase one final time to pull out a pristine, legally bound blue folder. Mr. Vance is operating under a severe, foundational misunderstanding of my client's financial structure. I present Exhibit D. The irrevocable trust documents. Eleanor handed the blue folder to the judge and tossed a copy onto Aaron's table. It landed with a heavy, definitive thud. 2 weeks prior to their legal wedding ceremony, Eleanor explained, her voice echoing with absolute authority, Anna established a legally binding irrevocable trust. This trust was initially funded by a massive inheritance from her late grandmother. Over the years, Anna deposited her corporate bonuses and vested tech stock options directly into this trust. Furthermore, the Cambridge condo is not, and has never been, in Aaron or Anna's individual names. The title is held by a private LLC, which is 100% owned and managed by the irrevocable trust. Aaron aggressively flipped through the pages of the document, his hands shaking violently. He was staring at the complex legal jargon, his brain desperately trying to process the magnitude of his absolute failure. Because the trust is irrevocable, and because Aaron is not, and has never been, listed as a beneficiary, Eleanor concluded, None of those assets are considered marital property under Massachusetts state law. They cannot be divided. They cannot be touched. Aaron does not own $500,000 condo. He owns half of a moderately priced living room sofa, half of a television set, and a used sedan. The total liquid marital assets available for division amount to less than $14,000 in a joint checking account. Aaron literally gasped for air. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of pure terror and profound realization. He had thrown away a brilliant, successful, loyal wife for a deceitful, unemployed sister, fully believing he was taking half of my empire with him as a parting gift. He had planned this for months. And in a matter of 20 minutes, I had legally reduced his entire grand master plan to absolute ash. Judge Margaret took off her reading glasses. The look of pure disgust on her face was deeply satisfying. She looked down at Aaron and Mr. Vance as if they were garbage that had been tracked into her pristine courtroom. "Counselor Vance," Judge Margaret said, her voice cold and hard as steel. "Your clients have brazenly utilized this courtroom to commit perjury in an attempt to fraudulently extort money from the respondent. Parties who misuse the legal system to wage personal vendettas are not viewed favorably by this court. Not only am I entirely rejecting your absurd motion for spousal support and medical expenses, but I am also ordering your client, Aaron, to pay 100% of Anna's legal fees for this proceeding." Judge Margaret picked up her heavy wooden gavel. She looked directly at Aaron. "You came into my courtroom looking for a payday based on lies, sir. You are leaving with nothing but the massive legal bill you generated. We are adjourned." The gavel slammed down with a loud, final crack. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard in my entire life. The immediate fallout in the courthouse hallway was a scene of absolute, glorious devastation. As Eleanor and I packed our briefcases and confidently walked out of the heavy wooden doors, the illusion of my family's united front completely shattered. There was no more hand-holding. There was no more supportive patting on the back. When the money vanished, so did their loyalty. Mr. Vance, the sleazy lawyer, was aggressively shoving documents into his bag, his face purple with rage. "You lied to me," he yelled right in Aaron's face in the middle of the public corridor. "You told me the pregnancy was high risk. You told me you owned that property. You committed perjury, and you made me present it. I am officially withdrawing as your counsel. Expect my final invoice by the end of the week, and if it is not paid, I will sue you myself." Vance stormed off without looking back. Aaron was standing against the marble wall, looking like he was going to pass out. He had no luxury condo. He had no alimony. He was legally mandated to pay Eleanor's massive retainer fee, Vance's final bill, and he was staring down the barrel of supporting an unemployed woman and a baby on a heavily compromised salary. Jessica, realizing that her ultimate meal ticket had just evaporated into thin air, immediately turned on him. The sweet, fragile victim persona vanished in a second. "What do you mean she gets to keep the condo?" Jessica shrieked, her voice echoing wildly down the hallway. "You promised me we were getting half. You said your lawyer buddy guaranteed it. Where are we supposed to live, Aaron? A tiny one-bedroom apartment?" My mother and father were standing a few feet away, absolutely shell-shocked. The reality of Jessica's massive employment fraud and Aaron's financial ruin was hitting them like a freight train. My mother looked at me as I walked past them. For the first time in 34 years, she did not look at me with condescension or annoyance. She looked at me with profound, undeniable fear. She finally realized exactly who she was dealing with. I didn't stop. I didn't gloat. I just kept walking, my heels clicking sharply against the marble floor, leaving them entirely in the burning wreckage of their own creation. The real-world consequences hit them fast and hard over the next 3 weeks. Word travels incredibly fast in the tightly knit Boston financial sector. When HR at Aaron's mid-level firm caught wind of the fact that he had been officially reprimanded by a federal judge for brazen perjury and attempted financial extortion, they didn't just keep him on probation. They fired him. He was completely stripped of his salary, his corporate benefits, and his industry reputation. Jessica, completely blacklisted from any reputable marketing agency due to her documented fraud in California, was forced to take a minimum wage retail job at a local mall just to help pay for groceries. The stress of actual, hard labor and a severely downgraded lifestyle caused endless, screaming fights in their cramped rented apartment. But the most profound collapse happened to my parents. They had heavily bankrolled Aaron and Jessica's aggressive legal strategy, fully believing that they would be paid back with massive interest once Aaron won half of my non-existent marital estate. When the lawsuit failed, Aaron and Jessica immediately defaulted on the massive loans my parents had given them. To cover the rapidly mounting debt and the exorbitant legal fees, my parents were forced to take out a massive second mortgage on the childhood home I grew up in. Their pristine, carefully guarded 401k retirement funds were completely drained. Desperation makes people completely abandon their pride. About a month after the trial, my phone started ringing. It was my father. I sent it to voicemail. Then my mother called. Then my father again. Finally, my mother left a deeply pathetic, 3-minute voicemail. "Anna, please," her voice shook on the recording. She was full on sobbing. "Please pick up the phone. We are drowning. The bank is threatening to foreclose on the house if we miss another payment on the second mortgage. Aaron is entirely broke, he cannot find a job anywhere. Jessica is struggling so much. We made a terrible mistake. We trusted the wrong person. Please, you have so much money in that trust. You are our daughter. You cannot just stand by and watch your parents lose their home. Please, Anna. Have mercy on us." I sat in my beautiful, quiet condo, listening to the recording. I didn't feel a shred of guilt. I didn't feel a shred of pity. I took out my phone, typed out a single, precise text message to both of my parents, and hit send. The financial ruin you are experiencing right now is not a tragedy. It is not bad luck. It is the direct, mathematical consequence of your own malicious choices. You chose to fund a cheating husband and a deceitful sister in an attempt to steal from me. You placed your bets on the golden child, and you lost. I am not your backup bank account. Do not ever contact me again. I blocked their numbers permanently. I contacted the management of my luxury building and explicitly upgraded my security protocols, giving the guards their photographs and strict instructions to call the police if they ever came within 500 feet of the property. I closed the door on my family forever, and the lock clicked with finality. The silence that followed was the most profound peace I had ever experienced in my entire life. But toxic family systems are like a deeply rooted fungus, they always try to find one last dark corner to grow in. A few weeks after I sent that final text message, my phone rang with an unknown number. I cautiously answered it, thinking it might be a client from work. It was Aunt Linda, my father's older sister. She had always been the classic flying monkey of the family, the type of relative who never actually helps in a crisis but loves to sit on the sidelines and weaponize guilt and family values to force you back into line. "Anna, sweetheart," Aunt Linda began, her voice dripping with fake, syrupy concern. "I heard about everything that happened. It is just so tragic. Your poor father is not getting any younger, you know. His health is severely suffering because of all this immense stress. They are talking about selling the family house to pay off the massive legal debts." I leaned back in my office chair, staring out the window at the city skyline. "And?" I asked flatly. Linda let out an exaggerated sigh. "And, family should always stick together, no matter how bad things get. Yes, your parents made some terrible decisions. Yes, Jessica and Aaron did an unforgivable thing to your marriage. But at the end of the day, they are still your blood. Every single night, your mother cries herself to sleep. Can you really live with yourself, sitting in your luxury condo with your massive trust fund, knowing your own parents are losing everything because you are too proud to write a simple check?" She was using the oldest trick in the emotional manipulation playbook. She was trying to shift the accountability. If I didn't save them, I was the bad guy. Linda, I said, my voice dangerously calm. If you were so incredibly concerned about their dire financial status, why don't you write the check? Your husband's law practice is highly lucrative, and you own 3 commercial rental properties. Why am I the only one who is morally obligated to stand by people who actively tried to destroy me? That is completely different, she sputtered, clearly flustered that I was throwing logic back in her face. I don't want to pick sides. But you have a special obligation. When we get older, Anna, and we are all alone in the world, family is absolutely all we have in the end. You are going to profoundly regret abandoning them. No, Linda, I replied, the absolute truth ringing in every single syllable. They are losing everything as a direct result of their decision to condone, protect, and fund Jessica's atrocious actions. They wanted to destroy me to elevate her. Now they have to pay the invoice for that choice. And as for getting older? Self-respect is absolutely all we have in the end. And I am finally choosing to keep mine. Do not call me again. I hung up the phone and immediately blocked her number. That single phone call was the absolute best thing that could have happened to me. It completely crystallized my reality. It washed away the last, lingering ounce of childhood guilt that had been programmed into me for 3 decades. I felt truly, undeniably free. That very same afternoon, my boss David called me into his office. Because of my flawless execution of the recent software launch, the company was offering me a massive promotion. It was a vice president of engineering role, but it required relocating to their flagship headquarters on the West Coast. Seattle, Washington. 3,000 miles away from Boston. 3,000 miles away from the memories of the science fair, the silver Porsche, the stolen condo, and the courtroom. I accepted the offer on the spot. Yesterday, my colleagues threw me a massive farewell party at a high-end restaurant downtown. Chloe, David, Marcus from security, and a dozen other people who had stood by me during the absolute darkest months of my life were there. They gave me a beautiful card signed by everyone. David gave a toast, looking right at me, and said, "Your worth is never determined by those who are too blind to see it. We see you, Anna. And Seattle is lucky to get you." I looked around that table, clinking glasses with people who actually respected me, protected me, and valued my presence. It hit me right then, I had finally found my family. I had discovered that true family is not a biological accident of blood and DNA. True family is built entirely on mutual respect, unwavering support, and absolute trust. Today, I am sitting in the middle of my empty Cambridge condo. The walls are bare, the furniture is sold, and I am surrounded by neatly stacked cardboard boxes. I am writing this final chapter of my past life before I leave for the airport tomorrow morning. I am starting completely over. I am stepping into a massive new executive role, in a beautiful new city surrounded by mountains and ocean, with a heavily guarded financial portfolio and a heart that is completely at peace. If you are wondering, yes, Jessica had the baby a few weeks ago. A boy. No, I have not seen any pictures. No, I have not reached out. I have completely closed the book on that entire bloodline. They are strangers to me now. I want to thank you all for listening to my story. I know there are thousands of you out there who are currently acting as the designated scapegoat for your own toxic families. I know how badly you want their love, and I know how much it destroys you when they constantly choose the golden child over your loyalty. I need you to hear me right now. Walking away is not a weakness. Walking away is sometimes the most profound, most powerful act of self-love you can ever commit. Forgiveness does not mean you have to allow dangerous people back into your life, and setting a boundary is not an act of cruelty, it is an act of survival. Have you ever faced something similar with your own family? Have you ever had to cut off the people who were supposed to protect you? Share your story in the comments below. Let this community be your chosen family today. And please, don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next journey. Cheers to fresh starts, and cheers to taking our power back.